In 1975, in a village in Italy, a man named Tony Cicciarelli was seen painting.
Well, I'm so fucking sick of trying to fog me.
I'm going. Why am I waiting? It's my car, after all.
Not long after that, two of his friends named Fabione and Vittorio arrived. It turned out that the three of them had planned to start their journey to move to the city of Rome on that day because Fabione wanted to work as a factory laborer, Tony hoped to become an artist, and Vittorio intended to become a priest. Then, after Tony finished his painting, the three of them immediately went on their journey. Several days had passed since they moved to Rome. However, because he had no money, Tony worked as a street painter. Sometimes many people hired his services, but other times he did not get any customers at all. Because of that, he was occasionally able to eat, but he was more often hungry. Fortunately, despite his difficult life, he remained grateful because the most important thing to him was that his money was earned honestly. Tony went through month after month doing this street hustle, until one afternoon, he met a woman who truly loved art. She then invited him to go to a party at the home of a famous artist after seeing his art. Then, upon arriving at the artist's house, after seeing the artist living in luxury, Tony felt envious. Later, after the party ended, Tony went to the artist's room because he wanted to talk, but the man was already asleep. Shortly after that, a friend of the artist named Donata arrived. When he found out that she was an art dealer, Tony immediately shared that he was a painter. He claimed that his paintings were good, even better than the famous artist's work. Then, he told her his address and invited her to come the next morning if she wanted to see his paintings. Fortunately, Donata felt interested. The next morning, when Donata showed up at his place, Tony was still asleep, so she went to check on the painting instead. However, she was shocked because she saw a painting that looked like it was from a famous artist. Shortly after, Tony woke up, and she asked where he had obtained that famous artist's painting, but Tony answered that it was a fake, and explained that he had just copied the image from a book for fun. However, because the work was 99.9% identical to the original, Donata was amazed. Because she still found it hard to believe that he had copied the painting so perfectly, Donata told Tony to try making another painting from a book. She also gave him her business card and said that once it was finished, he should just bring it to her house. A few days later, while Tony was painting, Fabione showed up and said that he had just resigned from his job at the factory to join a group of activists fighting against the government called the Red Brigades, and the reason he met with Tony was that his group needed weapons, so he invited him to rob a gun store and steal some money. At first, Tony was hesitant, but because he was also in dire need of money, he was forced to come. That night, they began their mission. Things worked out smoothly at first, but then Tony was spotted by a guard. Fabione tried to help, but he got shot.
What are you doing?
Fortunately, they managed to escape the place, and they immediately went to see Vittorio at the church to treat the gunshot wound. At that moment, knowing that his two friends were troublemakers since they were young, Vittorio was not surprised at all, but after finishing the treatment, he lectured his two friends about repenting for their actions. However, instead of listening, Fabione just laughed it off. Then, Tony invited Vittorio to accompany him to a woman's house the next morning. The next day, Tony and Vittorio drove to Donata's house. When they arrived, Donata focused entirely on examining the painting, and because he did not want to disturb them, Vittorio said goodbye and left first. After a thorough examination, Donata suddenly gave 300,000 lira to Tony and promised that if the painting was sold, she would give him even more money. Tony was happy upon hearing that because he had never received that much money before, and in that moment, something changed in his mind. He realized that, compared to honest money, illegal money was much easier to get. Then, to celebrate his success, Tony invited Donata to a club later that night. That night at the bar, while Donata went to get a drink, Tony saw a man inviting her to a restaurant downstairs, so he followed them. It turned out that she was sitting with a group of gangsters. She then informed Tony that the leader of the gang, whose name was Balbo, was her friend. It was then revealed that, besides selling art, Donata was also a receiver of stolen gold. Then, after they were introduced and talked for a while, Tony showed his skills to them. He suddenly took a fake check worth 3 million lira and said that he was not only good at forging paintings, but was also an expert at forging signatures. Upon hearing that, Balbo became interested. The next day, Balbo visited Tony at his apartment to see his paintings. There, Tony offered to do any kind of work for him, including robbery, saying that if Balbo was interested in his skills, he was willing to work for the gang as long as he was given a new studio for his art. Upon hearing that, without thinking much, Balbo immediately agreed.
Look at the light in here. But I can't afford it. You don't have to pay. Just do a job for us every once in a while.
A few days later, Tony went to see Donata, and she gave him the money from the sale of his painting. When he found out the high price of his fake work, Tony was shocked. He realized that if things continued like this, he could become extremely wealthy. Month after month passed, and eventually, Tony had a new painting studio. While he continued painting once in a while, Balbo would come and ask for his help to forge documents. His life had also completely changed. He was now able to buy a house and marry Donata. However, without realizing it, he had entered a dark and dangerous world, and he would soon learn that humans who live off illegal money can never truly live in peace. One night at a bar, Tony met Balbo, who introduced him to a hitman who wanted to forge a passport. So, Tony invited the man to his studio. Then, while they were talking, the hitman was initially indifferent, but when he learned that Tony actually liked the Inter Milan football club, the hitman became friendly and said that they were now friends. A few days later, while Tony was in a car with Balbo's gang, he heard a news report on the radio stating that a government party leader named Aldo Moro had been kidnapped by the Red Brigade's activists. He was shocked to hear that name because he knew that was Fabione's group. Later, after he arrived at the studio, Tony met a politician named Zu Pipo who wanted to order a fake painting. The man then showed him a picture and asked him to make the painting look as similar as possible. The next day, there was a viral news report on television about the massive search for Moro. The news also mentioned that the Red Brigades had sent a leaflet to the leaders containing demands for Moro's release. Upon hearing that, Tony felt worried because Fabione had dared to do that far. That night, Balbo took Tony to meet an organization called The Tailor. It turned out that the leader of the organization wanted his help to create a leaflet exactly like the one from the activists, but the content would state that Moro was already dead. He told him not to ask many questions and to just do the work. In that moment, because he was terrified, Tony could only obey. Long story short, some days later, after the fake leaflet was finished and handed over, Tony and Donata met the leader of the Tailor on their way home. They immediately stopped, and Tony told her to wait in the car while he faced the leader. Then, when they spoke privately, the leader said that he needed Tony's help once more. He revealed that he knew Tony was a friend of Fabione from the Red Brigades, so he asked him to tell his friend that the Pope from the Vatican had collected 10 billion lira to free Moro. Later at home, Donata asked who that man was, but because he did not want his wife to be involved, Tony tried to change the subject. However, Donata's anger exploded. She knew that her husband was hiding many things from her. She then questioned why he kept everything a secret from her, and told him that if he still refused to answer, she didn't want to sleep with him. The next night, Tony and Fabione met at the church. He then delivered the message from the leader of the Tailor to Fabione. Upon hearing the message, Fabione said that he would discuss it with his group first. The next morning, the two of them met again in an empty building.
What is this place? Come on, we don't have much time.
It turned out that the Red Brigades had agreed to free Moro for a ransom of 10 billion lira and told Tony to just bring the money to a location they would provide. He also showed Moro's photo as proof that the politician was still alive. In the afternoon, Tony went to an appointed location to meet a representative from the Vatican who was supposed to hand over a suitcase full of money. However, when they met, the representative suddenly stated that the negotiation was cancelled and said that the ransom money would not be given. He also demanded to know where Moro was being held. At the same time, members of the Tailor were watching from a distance. At that moment, because he realized that something was wrong, Tony contacted Vittorio and told him to warn Fabione that the deal was off and to escape quickly. A few days later, on the 9th of May, 1978, a news report on the radio announced that Moro's body had been found in the center of Rome. Upon hearing that, Tony hurried to the scene immediately. The next afternoon, while Tony was playing billiards with Balbo, the gang leader shared that the Tailor was actually an evil organization. He explained that they had once asked for his help and promised to free one of his friends from prison in exchange. However, even after he did what they asked for, his friend was never released. Balbo then told Tony that he was lucky. He believed that if the negotiation the other day with the Vatican had succeeded, the Tailor would likely have hunted him down and killed him to take the money back. Balbo said that he did not know their true goal, but he was certain that from the very beginning, the Tailor had never intended to set Moro free. Later that night, when Tony returned home, he saw Donata packing her clothes into a suitcase. She then told him that she had had enough. She felt that her husband hid too many things from her and did not treat her like a wife. She also said that he had not made a single painting for her to sell in a long time. Her decision was final, and she planned to leave. Because of this, Tony could only stand there in silence. Sometime later, Balbo was driving his car at high speed, but when he hit the brake, the car didn't slow down. At that moment, he realized that his car had been sabotaged, but it was too late. In the end, he died in an accident. In the afternoon, Tony went to Balbo's funeral. He knew for sure that this was the work of the Tailor. Meanwhile, from a distance, he saw that the leader of that organization was also present. Tony, who noticed him, immediately confronted the man and shouted at him. However, the leader remained calm and stated that this was a warning for him to obey his order. He warned him not to dare fight back, and if he wanted to be free, he had to find the secret notes that belonged to Moro. However, Tony, who had had enough, just walked away. That night, while Tony was on the phone, a stranger secretly entered his house. They then held him and injured his hand. The next day, Zu Pippo came to visit Tony at the hospital. The politician suddenly told him that he already knew what had happened. He then shared a story about how he had once been scammed for tens of millions of lira by a friend with a higher position in the government. However, because he understood his position, he chose to stay quiet and not make the problem worse. He then hoped that Tony would not be too reckless, telling him that in a dark world full of dirty politics, getting a lot of money is easy, but they should know their limit. 5 months later, Tony received a phone call from Vittorio, who informed him that Fabione was currently at the church. Upon hearing that, he rushed there immediately. After not seeing each other for a long time, the three of them were finally able to gather again. At that moment, Fabione said that he was now a wanted fugitive, so he asked Tony to help him by creating a fake passport. Upon hearing that, Tony agreed to help, but he asked Fabione to give him the secret notes belonging to Moro in return. Fortunately, Fabione agreed to the deal. As a good friend, Vittorio also wanted to help by offering his old car, since he had recently bought a new one. However, Fabione refused the offer, while jokingly saying that his old car looked like a piece of junk.
What, are you gonna give me your fancy car?
I knew it. Sooner or later.
After that, later that night, the three of them played soccer together to remember their childhood. The next day, Tony went to Donata's house to apologize and beg for another chance. During their conversation, he accidentally touched her stomach and realized that she was pregnant. Upon knowing that, he felt very happy and touched her belly gently. Seeing this, Donata finally forgave him. Long story short, once the fake passport was finished, Tony met with Fabione. According to their agreement, Fabione handed over Moro's secret notes. In that moment, because they knew that they might never see each other again, the two hugged and encouraged one another. Unfortunately, the next day, before Fabione could leave, the police surrounded his hiding place, and he was killed while he was trying to escape.
Now, suddenly, just when a faint glimmer of hope was appearing, the order for execution arrives incomprehensibly.
In the afternoon, Tony asked Vittorio to hide Moro's secret notes and keep them safe from everyone. He requested that if anything happened to him, Vittorio should give the notes to Donata. Vittorio promised to do so. The next day, Tony met with Zu Pippo and told him that he had successfully tracked down the location where Zu Pippo's stolen money was being kept. He then proposed that he and his gang would rob the place as long as the money was divided equally. He also said that after getting his share of the money, he and his wife would leave Italy forever. Fortunately, Zu Pippo agreed to the plan, so that very night, Tony and his gang carried out the mission. After successfully taking all the money,
It's clear, it's clear, it's clear. Red Brigade! Red Brigade!
This wasn't just a heist.
Tony took photos of the guards that they had tied up in front of a Red Brigade's banner. He did that so the police would believe that the robbery was committed by the activist group. The next evening, Vittorio was seen being fitted for new clothes when the leader of the tailor suddenly arrived to meet him. Then, without hesitation, the leader said that he had evidence of Vittorio's church fund's corruption that he used to buy a new car. Upon hearing that, Vittorio became terrified. The leader told him that if he did not want to be reported, he had to reveal where Moro's secret notes were hidden. The next morning, when Tony returned home, he found the hitman he had met some time ago, already waiting for him. The hitman explained that the leader of the tailor had paid him to kill him. He also revealed that Tony's friend, Vittorio, had already leaked the location of Moro's notes. Upon hearing that, Tony was shocked. Fortunately, because Tony had helped him before and because they were both fans of Inter Milan, the hitman said that he would let him live. However, in exchange, he told him to find someone whose face looked like his to be killed instead. Later that night, while Vittorio was at a restaurant, a waiter gave him a letter from Tony. In the letter, Tony wrote that he never expected his childhood friend to betray him. He expressed how disappointed he was. Fortunately, despite the pain, he chose to forgive him, thinking that perhaps his life had been threatened. He then informed him that he was leaving Italy forever, and, as a parting gift, he was giving him his car. He then said goodbye to his friend. Upon reading the letter, Vittorio could only cry in regret. After that, Vittorio went to see the car, but as soon as he got inside, the hitman, who was already waiting inside, suddenly shot him dead, because it turned out that Tony had used him as his double to get killed. At the same time, Tony and Donata were seen in a taxi. He was clearly in terror and scared. Upon seeing him, Donata tried to calm her husband down. In that moment, he told her that everything was finally over and that they would soon leave that terrifying dark world behind.